for the preacher.
Would you pray with me? Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, for you are my rock and my strength, my Redeemer. Amen. Wow. What a biblical text to deal with today. If I had to give this a title, I guess the best I could do would be, don't get caught up in the glory until you know the story. Don't get caught up in the glory until you know the story. In our text today, Jesus is on his way to Jerusalem and he's heading to the cross. But there's a crowd that's following him and they think, yeah, they know he's on his way to Jerusalem, but they think he's on his way to something grand. And so knowing this, Jesus now decides to open an outdoor class. Jesus teaches them that discipleship carries a high price tag. And if you ever have gone into real expensive stores, which I normally don't unless I'm with some friends who got a lot of money, they don't have price tags on a lot of things. And that's why they don't probably look at me, because the first thing I ask is, how much does it cost? And I was told, if you got to ask how much it costs, you can't afford it. So I stay out of those kind of places because some people walk in and they just want to know, can I get that in blue? Can I get that in black? I want to know, how much does this thing cost before I go any further? But here, Jesus is not hiding the price tag. Jesus is putting it right out there for everybody to see. In other words, he's saying, don't get caught up in my glory until you know my story. So I propose that Jesus knows that his time is now short, so he really wants to get right to the point to some of these wannabe disciples. Since the world has missed his point for 3 years, he figures now is a better time than ever to get my point across. My mother used to say, when she was getting older, she said, you know, the older I get, the less time I have for foolishness. And so I believe that's where Jesus is right now. He's not old, but his time is short. And so he said, I don't have much time, so I want to get right to the point for you wannabe disciples, because you're following me and you're excited, and you're following me because you think it's going to help your CV. It's going to help you in your next job promotion. I could just imagine those in the crowd talking about, oh yeah, this is going to look good. I'll probably get the promotion. I'm hanging with Jesus. And I'm sure enough going to get a blessing being with Jesus. But Jesus then, knowing that, stops. And he demands commitment, which is an unpopular word even in these days. We're tempted a lot of times trying to fill pews in our churches to promise a new car in every garage, you know, name it, claim it, blab it, grab it. We're tempted to not challenge the people to a faithful stewardship and faithful worship attendance, honest business practices, accurate tax returns, and how about having some compassion for those that are less fortunate? Yeah, we hope that if we don't talk about that maybe they'll come back next week. But here, Jesus does not make discipleship sound easy. He does not offer an easy payment plan, and he never tries to disguise the true cost of discipleship. Instead, he writes the price tag large and in large letters for everybody can see. You heard the verses that were read. Dr. Williams read those verses. And he starts off in verses 25a, and he says something shocking. It's a transition because he just left the home of the Pharisees, and now he is addressing this small group or the crowd that is following him. And he says, if you come to me and you don't hate, oh my, your father, your mother, your wife, your children, your brothers, your sisters, and yet even your own life, you can't be my disciple. That's a hard verse to hear. And I struggle because I'm trying to find some good news. I want to give you some good news before we leave, but you can relax and exhale, because this here is really just an exaggeration, I believe, for effect. Jesus is not calling us to hate our father and our mother, but instead, he's simply calling us to a commitment above all other commitments, including commitment to family. In other words, in his day and time, that word hate, it doesn't mean to disguise or despise. It means you're going to love him more than all others in the world. Now, Matthew has a better translation, but Luke kind of hits it real hard here. And he says, whoever doesn't bear his own cross and come after me can't be my disciple. I said, wow. In verse 26, you told us to hate even our own life, and now you're telling us to carry our own cross. And back in the biblical days, that there was an instrument of death. But hold on. What Jesus is saying, he doesn't simply call us to believe that he existed or even believe that he can save us, but he calls on us to commit our whole lives to him. In other words, to trust him, and then to be able to follow him, even as his disciples followed him. In other words, beloved, you have to be all in. You cannot be half-hearted. In other words, you have to die to yourself. You have to deny your own self. And that's another hard principle when this world we live in today, that sometimes it seems to be all about me. But how many know it really isn't all about us? We have to be able to die to ourselves. That's why I love that song we were singing. Here I am, Lord. Here I am. Send me. Here I am. I'm wondering if we're able to empty ourselves of ourselves, that we're able to say, here I am. You got to die to yourself. I have my own plans for my life, but God had other plans. By now, I would be a retired state trooper, but God had other plans for my life. I'm still working. But if I would have followed my plan, I would have been finished working by now. Yes. Jesus does have a sense of humor. We have to learn to die to ourselves. And so another thing, when we get down to verses 28 to 32, one thing I like about Jesus, when he knows that people got that deer in headlight look, you know that look you get in class sometimes when the professors are going real deep, and you just kind of sit there looking glazy-eyed, like, what in the world did they just say? When Jesus knew that the crowd, and I know he knew, he looked at them and said, yeah, y'all are stunned. So what he does, a lot of times he will use metaphors and parables, and that's what he does in verses 28 down to 32, when he talks about if you're going to build a building or a tower, you got to first sit down and count the cost. Or what king, if he's going into battle and see that he's outnumbered, doesn't sit down and count the cost to see, does he have enough strength to win this battle? In other words, what he was saying, don't start until you have counted the cost and assessed the likelihood of success. In other words, plan carefully to avoid disappointment. Prepare now, he says, lest you will meet with disaster. Can I bring it in a little bit? You did that to come to seminary. You had to count the cost. I'm going to be here so many hours a day, sometimes on the weekends, Friday and Saturday, from 6 to 9:30, and then Saturday, 8 o'clock for chapel and 9 o'clock for class and up to 12 o'clock. And then I got to pay this, that. I'm going to be away from my family and friends and all of that. You have to sit down and count the cost. Am I going to be able to do this? Am I going to be all in? And once you make up your mind, then yes. And so then a lot of times there's people that look at your glory, but they don't understand your story. They'll see you at graduation when they give you the hood, but how many know LTS and Moravian aren't just giving out hoods? They aren't just giving out degrees. If you get it, you have earned it. And a lot of times people get jealous over that, but you earned every letter behind your name. They see your glory, but they don't know your story. They don't know the countless hours you stayed up studying. They don't know how many times you had to eat Roman noodles and all that other kind of stuff, trying to figure out how I'm gonna pay for this. They don't understand the sacrifice that you had to make, but you made it. And for those who are still making it, hang on, it gets better. Then he says at the end, after he says all this other stuff, he says, if you don't renounce all that you have, you're not worthy of being my disciple. And I said, wait a minute, coming from my tradition, we didn't have much to begin with. We were struggling from the beginning. Matter of fact, I didn't know I was poor until I went to school with some of my other friends and they told me the good things they had. I didn't know I was poor, but we didn't have much. And then when I read this, he says, you mean I got to give up the little bit that I do have? What did you just say, Jesus? The world has already taken all that I have, and the little that I do have, I got to give all that up? No, Jesus makes it very clear that becoming a Christian means turning toward God and turning away from the concerns for possessions. In other words, I can have nice things, but nice things don't have me. I can have a lot of money, but money doesn't have me. In other words, God is not saying he needs you to be broke. No, that's not what he's saying. You can have nice things. You can live nice, but those nice things should not get in the way of your service to the Lord. That way, you won't get on Facebook complaining that the watch you have didn't cost $1 million. Because it's not about the bling bling. And I'm so glad that God knows that he can trust us, that if he blesses us, we'll use our blessings to be a blessing to somebody else. So have you counted the cost? Are you going to be all in? Aren't you glad that being a Christian is really not about the bling bling? And it's not about what I can get out of it. It's really not even about us, but it's about humility. And I love the cross, the symbol of the cross. One of my seminary professors in my MDiv talked about the cross, that's the symbol of humility. Because when your arms are outstretched, you can't hurt anybody. When your arms are outstretched, you're welcoming. You're not trying to hurt anyone. It's not my will, but your will. That's true Christianity. Not getting my own way, but being concerned about other people, watching how I talk, watching how I interact, watching how I do things, that I'm not doing any harm, that I'm not kicking people out, but I'm actually bringing people in. Before you get struck on the glory, beloved, make sure you understand the story. God bless.